I will shortly just introduce why these kind of talks are important for ThoughtWorks. I will introduce a bit myself and also our two amazing speakers tonight. First of all, why ThoughtWorks would bother doing these kind of talks and events. ThoughtWorks is, in my experience, personally, first of all, is a place that really is amazing to grow in terms of diversity and inclusivity. It's a world first organization or company that promotes values of diversity and inclusion in all kinds of ways. One of them is LGBTQIA+ diversity. I've personally been involved in this at ThoughtWorks Germany. I am in Hamburg. I'm a developer. I've been at ThoughtWorks for a year and a half now. And yeah, I'm one of the anchors of QueerWorks. QueerWorks is kind of responsible for LGBTQIA+ diversity in ThoughtWorks Germany. So let's go over to our two speakers tonight, Michael and Dr. J. First, I will present Michael. Michael is currently leading ThoughtWorks' office operations from Spain, and he is collaborating on a remarkable employee experience where diversity plays a key element by mixing his background in marketing, politics, and social change. During his time at ThoughtWorks, Michael has promoted the creation of an alliance for LGBTQIA+ employees, worked alongside Barcelona's City Hall to develop corporate policies and programs and lead the growth of the local LGBT+ in tech meetup community, with the ultimate focus of ensuring diverse and safe spaces for the LGBT+ community and therefore all matters of diversity. Dr. J. They then, out as a non-binary genderqueer for over 10 years, Dr. J has been bringing queer theory with a slice of humor into the tech space, building on ThoughtWorks' dedication to inclusivity and intersectionality. Dr. J takes a strategic view of cultural change in technology through a few lenses, notably queer theory. This combines well with their years of experience using agile processes to build software and a talent for really understanding clients, looking at the problems they're solving and how they make great teams to deliver real value. Their passion, how you can do things better with just simple changes, bringing their service design thinking into both the technology and diversity and inclusion spaces. Troublemaker, #queer nuisance. So thank you very much to our two speakers, and I'm going to hand it over to Michael.
Cool. Thank you very much, Mattia, for the introduction. Let me share my screen, which probably verifying that you can see it all correct is probably one of the most frequent asked questions this time. I hope it's working. Yeah, cool. Excellent. So what can be done next? Actually, that's the title that I wanted to highlight a little bit on my talk. And to start with that, I like to go a little bit on my background and with the question or the idea that if I consider myself an activist. And the short answer actually is no, even if I had some background with LGBT organizations or working with some stuff, with the fact that I never considered that in my privileged position, I was putting in danger my privilege. I always work and use my position to be engaged, but I never felt that I was losing power or that I was being put myself in risk or that I would lose opportunities on that side. Therefore, I like to identify myself more like maybe as a partner, as a collaborator, facilitator, an advocate, or as an ally for the general cause. And understanding ally as a privileged person that is using that privilege to support oppressed population. So, sorry. Talking about definitions, I want to go back then to the definition of what a company is, which at the end, it's a commercial business. There is commercial money. The purpose of a company is to make cash, to get revenue of that. So going back to the idea of activist, I think that it's a little bit contradictory to the nature of a company to be an activist, because a company would never risk their privilege for making money for never will lose that kind of privilege. So can we ask a company to be an activist? Yes, we can. That we can also, the answer probably is going to be a no sometimes. I wish we were getting more yes from that, but definitely what we can expect from the companies to be an ally. And that's something that we can demand. And maybe I'm not going to enter in the reasons why it matters for companies to be an ally, or what's the value that diversity brings to the company. There are several reports about it, just for the simple fact of that we have 57 people right now in this meeting caring about diversity. If our companies don't incorporate the D&I, they would lose ourselves any moment. That's a main reason, maybe, for incorporating D&I in our organizations. But what I want to try to focus is what can be done, or what actually means to being in an organization being inclusive. And the main point when talking about LGBT inclusion, when you're challenging a company if they are inclusive, if not, it's the idea of rainbows. When we arrive on the month of June, when we arrive on June 28th, there are rainbows everywhere. Even it's funny sometimes to see a Burger King or some kind of fast food restaurants just with a rainbow flag on it. And although it's nice, and I believe that I'm trying to assume that those organizations, what are trying to do besides marketing purposes or whatever the reasons that are behind it, what I always try to think that those organizations are trying to do good. The truth I always ask myself is that, is there anything else than rainbows behind it? And right now, in a couple of days ago, I participated in a breakfast about the World AIDS Day, which was yesterday, and I got the opportunity to interact with the HR manager for Gilead. Gilead is one of the biggest pharmaceutical in the world that provide treatments for that provide HIV treatments, and she used a very interesting sentence that I like to highlight in here about the treatment, or the way that organizations need to understand diversity, is that an organization doesn't need to know that an employee is HIV positive, but that employee needs to be 100% sure that they won't be discriminated against. And this idea, I think that should be very aligned within organizations, particularly in the tech industry, when we tend to think that because we are a new industry, everything is cooler than the rest, and maybe we don't need to put much efforts into that, because we believe that by default they are there. Some focus that we can actually start working or expecting diversity to be taken care of is from the leadership, or from the management teams of the organizations. Like, for example, having a real commitment from the leadership, it's the key element of that. If they don't buy that speech, then no one in the organization would be an advocate for it. There is also the recommended plan to have an action plan to work real LGBTI inclusion in the organization, how to measure it, etc. And also we need to make sure that all the policies are inclusive for gender, for sexual diversities, but overall also for all diversities, regardless of the nature of it. Another point of focus that can be applied is from the HR or from the people or talent perspective is, can we evaluate if our culture is inclusive enough? Do we have the tools to grow and support the learnings to work on diverse environments? And in here, it needs to be taken from two sides. One is from all the organization to learn to grow in those diverse environments, but also people that are coming from oppressed minorities. They also need to be applied the principle of equity for them to be able to succeed and support on the same level as their colleagues considered it as privileges. We also need to ensure that recruitment diversity goes beyond only targets, that and covering all during all the recruitment process. And particularly, we need to protect and accompany all trans and non-binary employees, being the traditionally most discriminated group within the LGBT community. There's no discussion that this needs to happen. Another key element of covering, it's about communications, and it's about what traditionally is called corporate responsibility. It's and we need to put an internal focus towards internal communication. We need to celebrate diversity in any form, in any way. Because diversity is transversal and it's intersectional. Sorry, and we can and we need to request good practices and to apply good practices, both internally, but also with our vendors, with our relationships outside that we take as an organization. And we also need to work for a non-tokenized marketing and external communication strategy where the LGBT community and other kinds of diversity are something else than rather a picture put it on a social post. That's definitely too much. And when you're thinking, what can I do? There's nothing I can do in here because there's everything very strategic or around. Maybe you're in a position of power to make some of those changes, but it goes very deep into the strategy of the organization for someone to feel capable to make any change. And the truth is that we as an individuals can make things, can make something. For example, you can reflect on the policies. Does the policies that you benefit from it can cover everyone on your organization? Do you have, for example, a policy that covers medical care from a family, but maybe the policy only covers if you're legally married? What happens if you're in a country where same-sex marriages are not recognized? Your colleagues, which technically have the same status or the same organizational family as you do, cannot benefit from the policy as the way as you do. Can maybe the organization change the policy and make it a little bit better or a little bit more equitable towards what the rules of the country are so that all the employees can have the same rights? Similar to the benefits, it's very common, particularly, for example, on health benefits, on healthcare benefits, that in order to enroll your family or relatives, you need to be legally married. What happens for these people that are in countries or in regions that the same gender marriage don't have the same kind of recognition as heterosexual or different gender marriages? Or what happens if you don't want to marry at all, but you have some sort of a relationship that would benefit according the standards of a family? Can the company make something on regards of that? Also, it's about knowledge. We cannot expect people to learn about diversity and to be ready to work and to understand the world without the proper knowledge. So maybe you can ask your company to get the training, to get a specific support on a specific tool that you like to, not a specific tool, on a specific concept that you like to learn more a little bit. Do you detect that maybe you're cool with that? You consider yourself that you don't need to learn anything, but maybe you detect in some teams that it would be interesting to have a talk, some kind of training, some kind of support to handle a diverse, working with a diverse team. And also another action that you can take is creating a safe network for the LGBT community on the organization. Sometimes it could be just creating an event or identify yourself as an advocate, as an ally for the community. It could be a chat room, it could be a Slack room, it could be many different ways, but creating that network and then that sense of support, it's also a very important element that can be done. So the idea also is that even if we like to have rainbows, we need also to have that structure, the structure behind that justifies the existence of rainbows, so we can wear those rainbows proudly and confident that we are doing whatever we can from those inside. because also the idea is of what can be done next at the end needs to be converted on what can we as in individuals do next to actually make our organizations a little bit more inclusive. And that's it from my side.
I'm taking it it's me now. Thank you, Miguel, and thank you everyone for inviting me along. I'm from New Zealand, so I do talk slightly fast and I do have a slightly strong accent. So if I've said something you don't quite catch it, just feel free to mention it in the chat and I'll try to go a little bit slower. Let me share my screen. And then hopefully you can all see that. So I'm going to talk about inclusive teams to deliver. So this is something that I've discovered from the last 20 years of working with teams in STEM and also outside of STEM. So I've done a number of things inside of STEM. I've been a business analyst, I've been a project manager, all kinds of things. And outside of STEM, I've run activist groups, I've run an entire festival, I've been an event producer. So I'm taking all of the knowledge from that and putting it together. So what do I mean by inclusive teams deliver? Well, starting off, what do I mean by a team? Because you can spot that I'm a BA because I've immediately gone and started to break down 3 words and tried to understand exactly what each word means. So a team is literally just a group of people. They don't need to have a vision, a set role, or defined numbers. It's a group of people who are working together. And what do I mean by deliver? Well, by deliver, I mean making something happen. So we've got a group of people together who are making something happen. Now that can be a piece of software, that could be an entire festival, that could just be an event like today. So what do I mean by inclusive? How does that inclusivity connect across? Inclusive to me means that all voices are able to be contributing and all voices are valued. There's no voices that are privileged over others. There's no voices who are negated. It's all voices are given the space to contribute and all voices are valued. So how do you spot an inclusive team? And this is something that I've realized I can do now, just walking into a client or walking into a room or even walking into a Zoom room. I can really quickly spot when a team is being inclusive and showing the right behaviors. Because people are able to talk without fear. So people can speak up, they can express their lived experience, they can talk about why this matters to them, they can talk with passion, they can be vulnerable and express parts of their lives without fear of this being used against them, without fear of revealing your sexuality, your gender, your relationship status, whether or not you've got a child, anything like that will impact upon you. People are just able to talk and give their thoughts without being scared of what might happen. The group as a whole listen before talking. So it's prioritizing listening and understanding, and it's how people are listening. It's the mindset you're listening with. So are you listening for a gap so that you can say what's been building in your head? Or are you listening for a gap to ask a question to empathize with the other person and to really understand what's going on? And it's understanding where that mindset is. One of the big things is around consensus decision making. And you see this on the best agile teams where everyone puts their voice in and it's a joke about ThoughtWorks. How many opinions are there? Take number of thought workers, add at least 1. So if there's 5 thought workers in the room, there's probably going to be somewhere between 6 and 7 opinions. But this is a notion of our consensus decision making. Everyone gives their opinion and their idea of how we should move forward. It's discussed and the entire group as a group agree on the way forward. And that consensus decision making, I believe, is really, really key to spotting an inclusive team. It's also about being equitable and chances to contribute. And I know Miguel brought this up, this notion of equity. And it's about recognizing that there are some people, because of historical discrimination and the society that we live in, will have less chances to have contributed to this previously, there's less chances they will be in the room. There's less chances that there are people of color, that there are people who are Black, or in the UK it's called Black and minority ethnic, which is essentially Black and Asian origin. There are people who are migrants. There are people who have worked non-traditional jobs or have non-traditional families. And it's about ensuring that they have equitable chances to contribute to the discussion that's going on. And it's having that care and safety in conversations. If somebody is telling you something, if somebody is revealing something openly, the group needs to hold that and look after that. And it's about having that mindset of caring about each other. If somebody reveals something and they're obviously got a little bit upset or things got a little bit heated, it's about how we deal with that. It's about how we deal with somebody who's gone, look, this is just a bit too much for me. I'm going to go have a cup of tea. Do you just leave them alone, or does somebody go and have a chat with them? Does somebody ensure that any concerns that they've got are dealt with the group? So it's about that care and safety in conversations, making people feel that they feel safe within this group. So is all of these ideas about an inclusive team earth-shattering and new? Well, I wish it was, because then I'd be like, minted. But no, it's not. This has been around since the very start of Agile. And even in the proto-Agile, because inclusion is a mindset. It's about how we think about things. It's about the way that we go into those actions. Because we know that when you have the right mindset, you do the actions in the correct way. I'm trying to remember. Yep. We know that if we don't do the right actions right, if we don't have the right mindset. So many of us have stood in a stand-up where people are disconnected until it's their chance to talk. They've given their update and you can see them switch off again. They're not listening to everyone else's updates. They're solely waiting for their chance to talk, giving their update and going away, which is not what a stand-up is about. A stand-up is about the team sharing what's going on, ensuring that if somebody's getting stuck, somebody is there saying, actually, let me come and work with you, or that looks like a blocker, or let's have a discussion around that, or why is this story taking 5 days? Let's mob on it, or let's pick up the next story. Those are conversations we should be having at stand up, not waiting for our chance to talking and going away. And it's about that right mindset. And to get the mindset right, we want to use language that everyone is familiar with. So one of the things that we did around getting the right mindset around inclusion is to take the Agile Manifesto and look at how that same structure could talk about inclusion. So what I wanted to present is what we've called a manifesto for inclusion. So this is taking the Agile structure and the way of talking and using it to talk about inclusion. So to start off, we're uncovering better ways of building a diverse and inclusive technology industry by doing it and helping others do it. Through this, we have come to value. This is almost a direct lift from the Agile Manifesto, so 10 out of 10 if anyone spotted it. So the things that we have come to value: a focus on issues over a focus on identity. So there are multiple things that happen when you focus on identity. You end up with people saying, well, you can belong to the Black group. You can say to the Black woman, you can belong to the Black group or the women's group, but you can't belong to both groups, even though their issues may overlap. And it's about focusing on those issues that come through, those issues about representation, about being seen, about being included, about having your voices valued, affect so many people over those focus around those issues on identity. Now, this is not to say that identity isn't important, and it's important to ensure that we are representative, but it's focusing on the issues that come out of those, over focusing on the identity politics. It's about guidelines and flexibilities over policy and process. Now, I can give an example on this one. ThoughtWorks created a process of sorts that said you can't have any aliases on your email address. We'll set you up with an email address that's in a specific format, and that's it. And then I came along, because my first name is literally one letter. So people would put in my first name and the search wouldn't work, and they'd try to put a space in and the search wouldn't find me. And what they had to do was they had to go and put Dr. J and DRJ Harrison in because everyone needed to be able to find me on all of our email systems. And it's about having that flexibility and those guidelines to be able to sort things out. It's about things like your parental or your carer leave. Is it about being a parent, or is it about caring for somebody? Is it about being able to take leave if you're looking after an elderly parent, if you're looking after a peer or a partner who's suddenly unwell? Is those same, you've got those caring responsibilities, and how does that work together? It's about two-way communication over education. If I say something and somebody's like, that's not quite right, it's about having that two-way communication to understand and empathize why I might have said that over just straight out education. This stops us saying you're wrong and immediately getting people's backs up. This allows us to try and understand where somebody has come from. It can be anything from, I didn't know I'd only heard that word used a couple of times before and I didn't realize it was a pejorative term. And immediately the other person goes, oh, I completely understand. And let's start talking about how that word became a pejorative term, how that has changed in the last couple of years, and why you should never use that word again. And it's about making an inclusive space over reporting numbers. Now, we all like numbers and we all like to say we've got X number of trans people on our groups and things like that. But if you're not making an inclusive space where people feel okay to give their pronouns, where people feel okay to just use whichever bathroom is going to suit how they're feeling today, then that's a very different thing over reporting your numbers. And it's about that inclusivity. Now, it is not a binary. There is value in items on the right, and we value the items on the left more, which makes a little bit more sense when you see the full thing. Because if we look at the Manifesto for Inclusion in the same way as we look at the Agile Manifesto, it's about uncovering better ways of building this diverse and inclusive technology industry by actually doing it and helping others do it. And we have come to value a focus on issues over a focus on identity, guidelines and flexibility over the policy and process, this two-way communication over one-way education, making an inclusive space over reporting numbers. And again, it's not a binary. There's value in items on the right, and we value the items on the left more. And I know that I can't do left and right. So that's what I mean by inclusive teams deliver. So this is me. This is actually a drawing of me. I can sometimes look tidier than I am. This is my artist statement from, I wrote it about 2006, 2007, that if we are not visible, we cannot demand the world make space for us. Now, despite me saying that, I'm not a demanding person. What I'd like to do is to challenge you to go and look at this way of changing your mindset and think about how that might change the teams that you work in. By changing the teams that we work in, how that's going to change the companies we work in, and how that will slowly change the entirety of the industry. Because heck, why not go for trying to change the world? So you can find me, I'm Harbinger of Change because I got to write my own job title. Brilliant. You can find me on most mediums as DRJ Harrison. I've got a website, and this entire booklet thing, ebook, is available up on ThoughtWorks without any vowels, thought.works/inclusive, and you can download the entirety of this presentation. So what I'm going to do, if I go to this last page, I can leave this up while we talk if people want it, or we can just go to the Q&A. And thank you very much. I know that probably rattled through a lot faster than I intended.
Thank you very much, Dr. J. Thank you, Mikhail, as well. These were really, really informative, brilliant talks. I've learned a lot personally, and I'm looking forward to the Q&A. I just see 2 questions so far. So if somebody has questions on the slide, maybe, or if we want to go on from the first talk as well, there's a question. So I think I'm gonna go on and ask the first one. Oops.
Sorry.
Yeah, no. Okay, so the first question was, how do you bring more people in senior leadership positions to also support D&I efforts? That was from Camilla Kuhn. And I think, Mikael, this is for you.
Cool. So, for example, a practice that ThoughtWorks UK have put in place is challenge the leadership team to support diversity groups that originally they didn't feel connected with. And I think that that was a very interesting practice to put in place. What I mean by that, so for example, ThoughtWorks UK has a religious group, and the person from the leadership team that got assigned to support that group considers outside of the religious spectrum. Or a person that there is a group for maybe Dr. J, you can help me with that, but I think that there are two different groups that cover the kind of diverse capacities, one more focused on the psychological or mental wellness, and the other one is more regards on physical capacities. And both of the same rule apply, not necessarily someone from, well, the person supporting the leadership from the leadership team assigned to those groups are not connected to this reality at all, and don't even maybe probably have much information rather than regular one that they can obtain. By doing that, you are creating an advocate from scratch, from the very beginning, and this advocate, it's not just creating from zero, but it's learning all the knowledge from the core of the community. It's not about a book about how a random book for HR people about how to deal with a community XYZ. It's about the feelings, the perceptions, the life experiences of this community, and I think that that added a lot of value for that. Another suggestion, it could be actually highlighting and being the risk of empowering maybe junior people or people that would be considered junior to those leadership positions just for the fact that they belong to a diversity group. I'm a super fan and advocate of enabling this kind of situations, because I always had the personal doubt if someone is junior because it's being told or because the life and opportunities didn't provide the privileges to actually showcase that they are senior. So if the organization can actually take those tests, let's say it that way, I think that it's also the best way to challenge and to support this kind of growth.
Thank you, Mikael. Okay, so we have another question, and I think this one might need a bit of explanation. So it's from Carsten, and it reads consensus or systemic consensus or consensus principle.
Would this be for me of groups making decisions by consensus? Maybe if I describe it, and then because I have no idea what the three differences are, and rather than quickly going and Google, if I describe what I mean, we can then try and translate it off. So what tends to happen is the whole team get together to make a decision. It could be anything. One of the ones that we used in training was like, so what food are we going to eat? So everybody lists out, everybody says the food that they want to eat. And everyone looks at it and goes, well, I can't eat that food. So you can agree with somebody's opinion, you can agree with reservations, or you can disagree. So it's kind of like, well, I agree with Jay that vegan food sounds great, but I've actually never really had good vegan food, so I'm going to agree with reservations. Whereas somebody else might say, look, I'm on a low keto diet, so a lot of vegan food is quite rice heavy, so can we go somewhere that allows me to have something to eat? So you can kind of, everybody will talk about it around and around in circles, and it does sometimes feel like you go round in circles, but eventually you arrive at the decision to go to perhaps a vegetarian place that serves enough different types of food that everybody can have something to eat. So it's that consensus. It's rather than making a decision by majority rules, so some people feel left out, or making decision based on people's hierarchies. It's making a decision where everybody gets a chance to voice and be heard and to have their opinion considered in the final decision. Did that help, Carsten? And please feel free to speak up and explain it if I still haven't made sense.
Thank you. Yes, that helps. To me, the decision or the difference is that consensus, at least in German, means talking and discussing until everyone agrees to one solution, agreeing that this is the best one. Consent from sociocracy means reducing and lowering resistance until everyone agrees to support some solution, even if this person does not think it's the best one, but agrees to support the solution and do a prototype. That's the difference.
Okay, so I think I'm meaning the first one, where everyone talks it through and finds a way forward that everyone can agree on. Now, sometimes people end up with the second version as well, but they're both completely fine. It's that working in a non-hierarchical fashion where everybody has had the chance to express their opinion and to have their opinion considered in a fair and equitable way.
Does that answer your question? Okay, there's no follow-up. All right, thank you. Thank you, Dr. J. We have more questions coming up from Max. I live in Hamburg and would like to know how I can support people from underrepresented groups to get into tech.
Hire them.
Yeah.
Hire them. Literally, give somebody the chance. I mean, ThoughtWorks gave me, I mean, I'm a crazy queer, mental health problems, disabled, all this kind of stuff. They gave me a chance and hired me. You literally hire difference. Hire people who are not like you. Sorry, Miguel, I didn't even give you a chance to leap in there, but it's seriously, hire them. Find a way to hire them. Just get them in, because they will change how you see how somebody does that job. Because if you see somebody different like me who walks into boardrooms dressed like this and walks into boardrooms and has confident discussions with CEOs, you no longer think the person who walks into boardrooms is a white man who wears a suit, or a woman in a particular physique and in a particular style. You think that a blue-haired person who's dressed like a children's TV entertainer can also walk into the boardroom and have that same discussion, because it changes what you think of as who can do that job. And I'm sure there's other things, but hiring them is the first step.
I completely agree, being honest, personally, because I always believe that the biggest challenge towards how companies deal with diversity, even if they want to deal with diversity, is that most of the organizations doesn't understand that to have a diverse environment, you need to have diverse backgrounds and you need to have diverse origins for it. And with a different background, the pattern of the expectation won't necessarily fit. If you want to have quiet and automatically mechanized people to do certain part of the job, that's not diversity. For example, you need to have different kind of personalities. You need to have different ways of dealing with problems, of different ways of challenging or driving a conversation, and that's part of diversity. And I think that some organizations, although still see the value or the benefit of wanting to have a group of women, a group of queer or LGBT people, a group of ethnically diverse community, don't still understand that in order to have these groups, you need to set the framework to accommodate all these groups. So yes, hire them. And on a low level, I'm pretty sure that there are some organizations in Hamburg as well that can support people to learn tech. In Barcelona, there is an organization, for example, that it's called CodeBard. It's also in London, and basically it's a free space that people can go with a laptop. Sometimes even they get laptops provider where they can have mentors to teach them how to code. And if not, for example, if that does not exist in Hamburg, CodeBar, it's an organization that likes to open chapters in every city. So maybe you can organize yourself with a group of friends that know about tech and open a chapter for CodeBar in Hamburg or in other German cities.
And I'd also say, recognize you don't need to know how to code to work in tech. I can't code. I call it Cody stuff. If it comes up on a command line, I'm totally lost. But it's about having those different sorts of brains, which is why I'm a good BA service designer. You get somebody who's organized and able to produce a festival. They're perfect as a project manager, because they can deal with personalities, they can deal with stakeholders, they can deal with all types of stuff coming at them and still keep their calm and keep their cool and organize stuff to happen. So it's about looking outside that typical route that we do for tech as well, and saying to somebody, oh, you need to go to coding school. And it's like, well, actually, I'm probably better as a project manager than as a coder person. And it's about allowing people those entry level or those early career roles and saying, have a go and see how you go. What training do we need? How do we support you? Recognize the aptitude is better, and the attitude is better than the training that you've had, or the university you went to, or the job, the last 10 jobs that you've had.
Thank you, Dr. J. There's a follow-up, actually. Max said they are not in a position to hire. Does that?
And I think Miguel gave a really good answer, but Max, I'd love to hear from
you.
you.
Yeah, maybe I just explain it a little bit. I'm here because I was actually looking for such platforms in Hamburg to help, and so this question was more maybe for ThoughtWorks than for the speakers. Maybe to just show me some infrastructure where maybe I could support people. And I totally agree. I was based in Berlin before, and there were great opportunities to help junior developers. And I'm just so sick of this argument. If you go to your boss and say, hey, can't we hire somebody else? Then they come up with this argument, hey, they don't match. They don't have the skill set. So I thought maybe it's a good approach to start earlier and help people to get the skill set to get into these jobs. That was my my thinking.
Thank you, Max. Maybe you can reach out to me. I'm in Hamburg. I know a few organizations. There's a queer refugees organization I can get you in touch with if you want to do that. So I will have to go on with the questions. Sorry, there's a bunch of them coming up. We have now one from Susanna Jacobs, our colleague from Hamburg. Unless there's another Susanna Jacobs, I don't know. Could you give one or two examples on how, so this is for Dr. J, sorry. Could you give one or two examples of how to initiate two-way communication? I find it challenging to not come off as educational when trying to correct someone on SEJ topics.
So as somebody going through Brexit, the nightmare that it is, it's hard. And it's hard when you're the impacted group. So this is where allyship and having those allies and accomplices is really, really important, because going into battle when somebody is saying, oh, I don't believe in this non-binary thing, that's really hard for me. But somebody else can go in and have that discussion. So some of it's recognizing when it's not the time for you to have the discussion and asking somebody else to do it. And that can be quite hard to do. And that's what I mean by you need to be able to speak without fear. And you need to also be in a group that you feel that holds and cares for you. So you can say to somebody, hey, could you go and have this discussion? This is what somebody said. And they go and they will have an open discussion. For me, sometimes it's been around, it's not coming off as educational if you try and understand why somebody thinks that way. So I tend to use a lot, help me understand where you're coming from. Help me see what you've been reading. So if you phrase, even if it's just like, where on earth did you hear that crazy? You can say, help me understand what you've been reading, or help me understand where you heard that. And people will say, oh, I saw it on the Daily Mail site. And you're like, right, this is a really long battle. Or they can say, well, I got sent it by a friend. And I'm like, well, is it fake news or is it real news? Let's talk about how the news might be manipulated and actually open a discussion, which allows them to be vulnerable and go and change their mind. Because sometimes it's hard if somebody comes back. If you go back quite strong, which you're so tempted to do sometimes, somebody will put their feet in because nobody wants to think of themselves as being wrong. But if you go back and go, help me understand where you're coming from. And they're like, well, I've never really met a non-binary person. I'm like, hi. And they're like, oh, well, what does it mean? And then I'll start talking and you can actually open a dialogue. So, but it does take a lot of energy and a lot of effort. And it's also, that's why it's something that you can get other people to help you with. Does that help, Susanna? I was trying to think of some reasonable examples, but this week has been a little bit on the frantic side in the UK, especially.
No, definitely. Especially like the approach to like help me understand. I think that's super helpful, and I think I can use it for any kind of discussion. Thanks a lot.
I learned that from Tim Gunn by watching Project Runway. I've learned a lot of how to mentor by watching Tim Gunn on Project Runway, because you look at something and go, help me understand where you're thinking here. And the person will talk them through, and they'll sometimes be like, I'm not yet convinced, but I know that you'll make it. I know that you'll make it work. And then he goes away and the person just rips it apart and creates something new. But it's about that openness to, it's about creating that openness to them explaining where they're coming from. Because somebody might say something a bit dorky about non-binary people, just not knowing. And I know that it's especially hard in a lot of languages where they doesn't really exist as a pronoun, and language is weird. So it's also about letting people say, look, the language that I grew up speaking doesn't have they as a pronoun, so I'm really struggling to use they. And I'll be like, that's okay. Native English speakers use it all the time and just don't realize it. Here's some different ways of learning, of figuring it out. And here's why your English teacher taught you wrong. It's little things like that can really help. And I'm sure other people have ideas and ways of doing something like this and have done it themselves.
Thank you, Susanna. Thank you, Dr. J. I think there's no more new questions. I don't see any in the chat. If somebody would like to shout out, they can unmute themselves quickly and just ask the question. Oh, I think I see. No, yeah. So is there any questions left?
If there's not, then maybe I can do my very the thing we have to do in the end every time. And maybe if something pops up, just ping it to the chat. So we would like to let you know that, of course, our talk series will go on in the next year, and I am here to advertise a bit. So if you're interested, on the 27th of January, we will have a talk with Amy Weidner about how to recruit diverse in tech. And in February, we will have Katrin Rode on stage with her talk, Diversity in Tech. It's just not an excuse that it's difficult. So if you are interested, we of course invite you to also join one of these talks or both talks. Happy to see you in 2021. And before we end the event, we would like to give this little homework or exercise, self-exercise with you on your inclusion journey, let's say it like that. So ask yourself and ask for feedback from others. Can you identify one small improvement that your organization could apply to improve LGBTI inclusion? Do you feel empowered to share it with your stakeholders and make it happen? This is the question that Mikkel is asking us to think about. And of course, we will also send this question again with the follow-up message. Thanks again for listening.